In the quiet of ancient Athens, when the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, and the marketplace fell into shadow, there lived a philosopher whose name would echo through the centuries, not with the thunder of war or the clamor of politics, but with something softer, something gentler. His name was Epicurus, and what he offered the world was not complexity, not difficulty, not struggle, but something profoundly simple. He offered peace. He offered a way of living that requires nothing more than what we already possess, nothing more than the capacity to see clearly, to choose wisely, to let go of what disturbs us. Epicurus lived in a time not so different from our own, though the surface details might seem distant. There was uncertainty then, as there is now. There was anxiety about the future, confusion about what truly matters, a constant pressure to acquire more, to become more, to reach for things that seem just beyond our grasp. And into this world of striving and worry, Epicurus spoke words that were like water poured on parched earth. He said that happiness is simple. He said that peace is available to everyone. He said that the good life does not require wealth or fame or power or anything external at all. It requires only understanding. It requires only the wisdom to distinguish between what we truly need and what we have been taught to want. When we think about Epicurus today, we might imagine someone encouraging indulgence, someone advocating for pleasure without restraint. But this is a misunderstanding, a distortion of his actual teachings. What Epicurus meant by pleasure was something quiet, something sustainable, something that does not leave us empty afterward. He meant the pleasure of a peaceful mind. He meant the pleasure of a body free from pain. He meant the pleasure of sitting with friends and sharing simple food, simple conversation, simple presence. He meant the pleasure of not being afraid, not being tormented by desires that can never be satisfied, not being imprisoned by the endless cycle of wanting and disappointment. The philosophy of Epicurus is not loud. It does not demand anything from us. It does not insist that we transform ourselves overnight or achieve some impossible standard. Instead, it invites us to notice what is already here. It invites us to see that most of what we chase is unnecessary. It invites us to consider that the life we long for might be closer than we think, might in fact be available in this very moment if we are willing to release our grip on everything that does not truly serve us. Imagine for a moment a garden, not a grand estate, not a palace garden with elaborate fountains and sculptures, but a simple garden. This is where Epicurus taught. He withdrew from the noise and chaos of the city and created a space where people could come to think, to talk, to rest. The garden, as it came to be known, was not exclusive. It welcomed everyone, men and women, free people and slaves, the wealthy and the poor. What mattered was not social status or education, but the willingness to question, to learn, to live differently. In this garden, the teachings were simple. Epicurus did not write long, complex treatises that only scholars could understand. He wrote letters to his friends, offering guidance on how to live well, how to find peace, how to free themselves from the fears and anxieties that plagued them. And the essence of his message was always the same. Most of what we fear does not deserve our fear. Most of what we desire does not deserve our pursuit. Most of what we think we need, we do not actually need. Let us begin with fear, because fear is perhaps the greatest obstacle to peace. Epicurus observed that human beings are tormented by two primary fears: the fear of the gods and the fear of death. In his time, people believed that the gods intervened constantly in human affairs, punishing and rewarding, demanding sacrifices and worship. This belief created a constant state of anxiety. People lived in fear of divine retribution, never knowing when they might offend some deity, never feeling truly safe. Epicurus offered a different view. He did not deny the existence of the gods, but he argued that they are not concerned with human affairs. The gods, he said, live in perfect tranquility, undisturbed by the struggles and sufferings of mortals. They do not watch. over us. Do not judge us, do not intervene. This might sound bleak at first, as if we are alone in an indifferent universe, but Epicurus saw it differently. If the gods are not watching, then we are free. Free from the need to appease them, free from the fear of their anger, free to live according to our own understanding of what is good and right. And what about death? This is the fear that haunts us most deeply, the shadow that follows us through life. We fear the end of a consciousness, the loss of everything we know and love, the unknown that lies beyond. Epicurus addressed this fear with startling simplicity. He said, "Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not present. When death is present, we do not exist. Therefore, death is not something we will ever experience. It is not an event in our lives, but the end of experience itself. There is nothing to fear in that which we will never encounter." This might seem like a logical trick, a clever bit of reasoning that does not touch the deeper emotional reality of our fear. But if we sit with it, if we let it settle into our minds, it begins to shift something. We realize that what we fear is not death itself, but the idea of death. We fear the anticipation, the imagining, the dread, but the actual moment of death, the moment when we are no longer here, holds no terror because we will not be there to experience it. What remains then is life, this present moment, this breath. And if death is nothing to us, then we are free to live fully, without the constant shadow of ending darkening every joy. With these two great fears removed, the fear of the gods and the fear of death, what remains? What remains is the simple task of living well. And for Epicurus, living well meant living simply. It meant recognizing that our needs are few and that most of what we think we need is actually the product of false beliefs, social conditioning, advertising, comparison with others. Epicurus divided desires into three categories. First, there are natural and necessary desires. These are the desires for food when we are hungry, for water when we are thirsty, for warmth when we are cold, for shelter from the storm. These desires are easy to satisfy. They do not require wealth or status. A simple meal satisfies hunger just as well as an elaborate feast. Clean water quenches thirst as effectively as expensive wine. A modest home provides shelter as reliably as a mansion. Second, there are natural but unnecessary desires. These are desires for luxury, for variety, for refinement beyond what is needed. We might desire a gourmet meal instead of simple bread and vegetables. We might desire a large house instead of a small one. These desires are not inherently wrong, but they are not necessary for happiness. They can be enjoyed if they come easily, without struggle or anxiety, but they should not be pursued at the cost of our peace of mind. Third, there are unnatural and unnecessary desires. These are the desires that arise from vanity, from the need to impress others, from the endless comparisons we make between ourselves and those around us. The desire for fame, for power, for status, for possessions that serve no real purpose except to signal our worth to others. These desires are insatiable. No amount of fame is ever enough. No amount of wealth eliminates the fear of losing it. No position of power brings lasting satisfaction because there is always someone with more power, always the risk of losing what we have gained. Epicurus taught that the path to peace lies in satisfying the first category of desires, the natural and necessary ones, while being indifferent to the second and completely rejecting the third. This does not mean living in deprivation. It means living with awareness, with discernment, with the ability to distinguish between what truly adds to our well-being and what merely distracts us or creates new forms of suffering. Consider how much of our lives is spent pursuing things we do not actually need. We work long hours to afford things that do not make us happier. We accumulate possessions that clutter our homes and minds. We chase achievements that leave us exhausted and empty. We compare ourselves to others and feel inadequate, always reaching for the next milestone, the next purchase, the next validation. And in all of this striving, we lose touch with the simple pleasures that are freely available. The warmth of sunlight on our skin, the taste of fresh water, the comfort of rest after a long day, the presence of people who care about us. Epicurus himself lived modestly. His needs were simple. He ate plain food, bread, vegetables, water, occasionally some cheese. He did not seek luxury. He did not accumulate wealth. Yet he described himself as living like a king because he had everything he needed and wanted nothing more. This is the secret of his contentment, not having everything he wanted, but wanting only what he had. There is a profound freedom in this. When we stop needing more, we stop being controlled by external circumstances. We are no longer dependent on the fluctuations of fortune, the approval of others, the success of our endeavors. We become self-sufficient, not in the sense of needing no one else. Friendship was central to Epicurus's philosophy, but in the sense of not requiring external conditions to align perfectly for us to experience peace. The modern world tells us the opposite. It tells us that happiness lies in acquisition, in achievement, in constant growth and improvement. It tells us that we are not enough as we are, that we need more education, more money, more success, more beauty, more of everything. And so we exhaust ourselves in pursuit of these things, believing that once we reach some imagined destination, we will finally be able to rest, to be content. But that destination keeps receding. The goalpost moves. What seemed like enough yesterday is no longer enough today, and we find ourselves on a treadmill of desire, running faster and faster, but never actually arriving anywhere. Epicurus offers a way off that treadmill. He offers the possibility of stepping aside from the race, of saying, "Enough. What I have is sufficient. What I am is sufficient." This is not resignation or defeat. It is liberation. It is the recognition that the things we have been taught to want, more money, more status, more recognition, do not actually deliver the happiness they promise. They create temporary pleasure, yes, but they also create anxiety, stress, fear of loss, comparison with others who have more. The net effect is often negative. We end up less happy than when we started. But if we turn our attention to the simple pleasures that Epicurus valued, friendship, conversation, learning, reflection, the beauty of nature, the satisfaction of basic needs met, we discover a different quality of happiness. It is quieter, less dramatic, but it is also more stable. It does not depend on circumstances aligning perfectly. It does not require constant effort to maintain. It is available here, now, in this moment, regardless of what else is happening in our lives. Let us think about friendship for a moment, because Epicurus placed enormous value on it. He believed that friendship was one of the greatest sources of happiness, perhaps the greatest. Not friendship for the sake of networking or advancing our careers or being seen with the right people, but genuine friendship, the kind where we can be ourselves, where we are valued for who we are rather than what we can offer, where we share simple joys and support each other through difficulties. In the garden, Epicurus and his students lived together, sharing meals, sharing conversation, sharing their lives. This communal aspect was central to the philosophy. They were not isolated individuals pursuing happiness alone. They were a community of people committed to living well together. They helped each other see clearly, reminded each other of what mattered, supported each other in letting go of unnecessary fears and desires. This vision of friendship stands in stark contrast to much of modern life, where relationships are often transactional, where we measure people by their usefulness, where we maintain large networks of acquaintances but lack deep, sustaining connections. Epicurus would say that one true friend is worth more than 1,000 superficial connections. One person with whom we can speak honestly, share our struggles, and experience genuine affection provides more happiness than any amount of social status or popularity. And friendship, like the simple meal, like the modest shelter, costs nothing in material terms. It requires time, attention, vulnerability, care. But these are things we all possess. We do not need wealth to be a good friend. We do not need status or education or any external credential. We need only to be present, to listen, to care, to show up. As we continue to explore the teachings of Epicurus, let us remember that this is not an academic exercise. This is not about memorizing ideas or adding to our collection of knowledge. This is about living differently. It is about questioning the assumptions we have inherited, the beliefs that shape our choices, the patterns that keep us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. It is about discovering that peace is possible, that simplicity is enough, that the life we long for is closer than we think. The night deepens around us. The world grows quiet, and in this quietness we can hear the gentle voice of ancient wisdom, unchanged by time, offering the same invitation it offered thousands of years ago. Let go of what you do not need. Turn away from empty pursuits. Find joy in what is simple, what is real, what is here. Epicurus did not promise a life without difficulty. He acknowledged that pain is part of existence, that loss is inevitable, that we will face challenges and disappointments. But he taught that even in the midst of difficulty, peace is possible. Even when we cannot control our circumstances, we can control our understanding of them. We can choose where to direct our attention. We can choose what to value. We can choose whether to be enslaved by desires that can never be fully satisfied or to be content with what is sufficient. There is a story told about Epicurus in his final days. He was suffering from a painful illness, confined to his bed, his body failing, and yet he wrote to a friend describing himself as happy. He said that the pain in his body was counterbalanced by the pleasure in his mind as he remembered their conversations, their shared moments, the life they had lived together. Even at the end, even in pain, he found peace. Not because he denied the reality of suffering, but because he understood that suffering is not the whole of existence, that there is always something to appreciate, always something to be grateful for. This is perhaps the deepest teaching of Epicurus, that peace is not dependent on external conditions. It is not something we achieve by arranging our lives perfectly, by eliminating all sources of discomfort, by controlling everything around us. It is an inner state, cultivated through understanding, through practice, through the gradual release of false beliefs and unnecessary attachments. When we lie down at night, when the day's activities cease and we are left alone with our thoughts, what do we find? Often we find worry. We replay the day's events, judging ourselves for things we said or did not say, for opportunities missed, for mistakes made. We project into the future, imagining all the things that might go wrong, all the challenges we will face, all the ways we might fail. And in this mental churning, we lose the present moment. We lose the simple peace of resting, of breathing, of being alive. Epicurus would invite us to notice this pattern, to see how we create our own suffering through unnecessary worry, through desires that extend beyond what we need, through fears that have no basis in present reality. He would invite us to practice a different way of being, to notice what is actually here now, the softness of the pillow beneath our head, the rhythm of our breath, the absence of immediate danger, the fact that in this moment we have what we need. This practice of returning to the present, of noticing what is rather than what might be or what we wish were different, is not complicated. It does not require special training or esoteric knowledge. It requires only willingness to let go, again and again, of the thoughts that disturb us, willingness to rest in what is simple and immediate. The philosophy of Epicurus is sometimes described as hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure. But this is a shallow reading. What Epicurus pursued was not pleasure in the sense of constant stimulation, of seeking ever greater intensity of experience. He pursued ataraxia, tranquility, peace, the absence of disturbance. And he understood that this peace comes not from adding more to our lives, but from removing what disturbs us. Think of it like this. Our minds are naturally peaceful, like a clear pond, but we throw stones into the pond constantly, worries, desires, judgments, comparisons, and the surface becomes agitated, disturbed, unclear. The practice is not to add something to the water to make it peaceful. The practice is to stop throwing stones, to let the ripples settle, to allow the natural clarity to return. This is why Epicurus emphasized withdrawal from the busyness of public life, not because he was antisocial or believed in isolation, but because he recognized that the marketplace, the forum, the centers of commerce and politics are places where desires are constantly stimulated, where comparisons are inevitable, where peace is difficult to maintain. In the garden, away from the noise, there was space to see clearly, to remember what matters, to practice a different way of living. We might not be able to withdraw to a literal garden, to leave behind our responsibilities and obligations, but we can create spaces of withdrawal in our lives, moments of quiet, practices of simplicity, times when we step back from the constant stimulation, the endless stream of information and entertainment, the pressure to be productive and impressive and successful. We can create a garden within ourselves, a place of refuge where we return to what is essential. This is not escapism. This is sanity. This is the recognition that we cannot live well if we are constantly pulled in every direction, if we never pause, if we never question whether what we are pursuing is worth the cost. Epicurus taught that pleasure and pain are the primary guides in life, but he meant something very specific by this. He meant that we should avoid pain when possible and seek pleasure when it does not create greater pain. This is not license to indulge every impulse. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Many pleasures create pain. The pleasure of overeating leads to discomfort. The pleasure of intoxication leads to a hangover. The pleasure of spending beyond our means leads to financial stress. A wise person avoids these false pleasures, these short-term gratifications that carry long-term costs. Instead, Epicurus advocated for pleasures that are pure, that carry no negative consequences. The pleasure of friendship, which does not diminish with repetition, but deepens over time. The pleasure of learning, which enriches the mind without depleting anything. The pleasure of simple food when we are hungry, which satisfies without excess. The pleasure of rest when we are tired. The pleasure of beauty, a sunset, a bird's song, the play of light on water, which is freely available and costs nothing. These pleasures are sustainable. We can return to them again and again without diminishing returns, without creating problems for ourselves. They do not require wealth or status. They do not create envy or competition. They do not leave us feeling empty or craving more. They are sufficient in themselves. When we orient our lives around these simple, sustainable pleasures, something shifts. We become less dependent on circumstances beyond our control. We become less vulnerable to the ups and downs of fortune. We find that we have more than enough, that our lives are rich even if our bank accounts are modest, that we are content even though we have not achieved all the goals we once thought were necessary for happiness. This is the freedom that Epicurus promises, not freedom from all constraint or difficulty, but freedom from false needs, from manufactured desires, from the tyranny of never enough. It is the freedom to live according to our own understanding of what is good, rather than according to the opinions and expectations of others. It is the freedom to say, "This is sufficient, I am content." And what is remarkable is that this freedom is available to anyone, regardless of circumstances. A person living in poverty can practice Epicurean philosophy as well as a person living in wealth. In fact, perhaps better, because they are not as attached to material possessions, not as anxious about losing what they have. The principles are universal. Understand what you truly need. Satisfy those needs simply. Let go of everything else. This is a path anyone can walk. As we rest here in the quiet, as we allow these ideas to settle into our awareness, we might notice resistance arising. We might think, but I do need more money. I do need a better job. I do need to achieve my goals. And Epicurus would not necessarily disagree. He would simply ask, why? What do you believe that money or achievement will give you? Is it peace? Is it happiness? Is it freedom from worry? And if so, is that belief true? Have you examined it carefully? Often when we look closely, we find that what we truly seek is not the external thing itself, but the feeling we believe it will create. We want money because we believe it will make us feel secure. We want achievement because we believe it will make us feel worthy. We want recognition because we believe it will make us feel valued. But these are feelings we can cultivate directly without needing the external circumstances to change. Security comes not from having a large bank account, but from understanding that our needs are simple and that we can meet them in various ways. Worthiness comes not from achievement, but from recognizing our inherent value as conscious beings capable of thought, feeling, and choice. Being valued comes not from recognition by strangers, but from genuine connection with people who know us and care about us. When we see this clearly, we realize that we have been pursuing the means while forgetting the end. We have been so focused on acquiring the things we believe will make us happy that we have overlooked the direct path to happiness itself. And the direct path, according to Epicurus, is simple. Live simply. Value what cannot be taken away. Find joy in what is freely available. The Garden of Epicurus was not just a physical place. It was a symbol, a representation of a way of life. It was a place set apart from the noise and competition of the city, a place where different values prevailed. In the city, people fought for status, for wealth, for power. They measured themselves against others, always striving to have more, to be more. In the garden, people simply lived. They ate together, talked together, thought together. They did not compete. They cooperated. They shared what they had. They found pleasure in each other's company. This vision of community, of mutual support and shared simplicity is deeply countercultural, both in Epicurus's time and in our own. We are taught to be independent, self-sufficient, to make our own way without relying on others. We are taught that asking for help is weakness, that we should be able to handle everything on our own. But Epicurus understood that human beings are social creatures, that we thrive in connection with others, that some of life's greatest pleasures come from shared experience. In the garden, wealth was not hoarded individually. Resources were pooled and shared. If someone had more, they gave to those who had less. If someone was struggling, others supported them. This was not charity in the sense of the powerful giving to the powerless. It was mutual aid, the recognition that we are all in this together, that helping others is also helping ourselves because our well-being is intertwined. Imagine living in such a community. Imagine not having to worry about presenting a certain image, about competing for resources, about protecting what is yours from others who might take it. Imagine instead a sense of abundance, of trust, of shared purpose. This is what Epicurus created in the garden, and it is what he believed was possible wherever people chose to live, according to philosophical principles rather than conventional values. Now, we might object that this is unrealistic, that human nature is competitive and selfish, that such communities always fail. And it is true that the garden did not last forever in its original form, but the principles endure. The possibility remains. Wherever people choose to live simply, to share generously, to value friendship over possessions, the garden is recreated. It exists not as a fixed place, but as a quality of relationship, a way of being together. And even if we cannot create a full community along these lines, we can embody these principles in our own lives, in our own relationships. We can choose to be generous rather than possessive. We can choose to cooperate rather than compete. We can choose to value people for who they are rather than what they can do for us. These choices create small pockets of peace in a world that often feels harsh and hostile. Epicurus wrote that the man who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing. This is worth pondering. If we cannot find contentment with simple food, with basic shelter, with the company of friends, with the beauty of nature, then no amount of wealth or success will satisfy us. The problem is not in our circumstances, but in our relationship to them. We have been trained to always want more, to never be satisfied, to believe that happiness lies just beyond what we currently have. And this training keeps us perpetually dissatisfied, perpetually striving, perpetually anxious. The antidote is to practice gratitude for what we have, not as a moral obligation, not as something we should do, but as a practical strategy for happiness. When we notice and appreciate what is already present, the warmth of our body, the food in our belly, the roof over our head, the people who care about us, we realize that we are already rich. We have what we need. The restless seeking can stop. This does not mean we cannot work to improve our circumstances or pursue goals, but it means we do so from a place of sufficiency rather than lack, from contentment rather than desperation. And this changes everything. When we are not driven by need, we make better choices. We are not willing to sacrifice our integrity or our peace for temporary gain. We can walk away from opportunities that come at too high a cost. We can say no to what does not align with our values. Epicurus understood that the greatest wealth is not material, but spiritual. It is the wealth of a mind at peace, a body free from pain, relationships characterized by genuine affection and trust. These forms of wealth cannot be seized by tyrants, destroyed by natural disasters, or lost to economic collapse. They are ours, as long as we cultivate them, as long as we remember what truly matters. As we move deeper into the night, as the world around us settles into sleep, we might feel our own bodies relaxing, our minds quieting. This is the natural rhythm. Activity followed by rest, stimulation followed by peace. And in this rhythm, we find a mirror of Epicurean philosophy. Just as the body needs rest to restore itself, the mind needs periods of quiet to return to its natural state of clarity and calm. But we resist this rhythm. We fill every moment with activity, with stimulation, with noise. We check our phones before bed, flood our minds with news and entertainment, think about tomorrow's tasks, replay today's conversations. And then we wonder why we cannot sleep, why we feel anxious, why peace eludes us. We have not allowed the transition. We have not created space for the mind to settle. Epicurus would suggest a different approach. As the day ends, let it end. Let the activities cease. Let the striving stop. Create a boundary between the busyness of the day and the rest of the night, perhaps through a simple ritual, a walk, a cup of tea, a moment of reflection, something that signals to the mind, the day is done. We can rest now. And in that rest, we practice letting go. We let go of what happened during the day, the mistakes and successes alike. We let go of tomorrow's worries, recognizing that we cannot solve them now, in the dark, in our beds. We let go of the need to figure everything out, to have all the answers, to be in control. We simply rest. We allow ourselves to be held by the darkness, by the silence, by the simple fact of being alive and breathing. This practice of letting go is central to Epicurean philosophy. We let go of desires that disturb us. We let go of fears that have no basis in present reality. We let go of attachments to outcomes we cannot control. And in the letting go, we discover a lightness, a freedom, a peace that does not depend on anything external. Epicurus taught that we should measure wealth not by what we have, but by what we do not desire. A person who wants nothing beyond the basic necessities is richer than a king who constantly craves more. This is a radical inversion of conventional thinking, but it points to a profound truth. Our subjective experience of sufficiency or lack is determined not by objective conditions, but by the relationship between what we have and what we want. If we have little but want less, we feel rich. If we have much but want more, we feel poor. The solution to poverty, therefore, is not always to acquire more, but to want less, to cultivate contentment with what is, to recognize that most of what we want is the result of conditioning, of comparison, of false beliefs about what will make us happy. This does not mean we should never work to improve our material circumstances. If we are hungry, we should eat. If we are cold, we should seek warmth. But beyond meeting basic needs, additional wealth does not necessarily increase happiness, and may in fact decrease it by creating new worries, new responsibilities, new desires. The happiest people are often not the wealthiest, but those who have found the balance between having enough and wanting little. Epicurus himself exemplified this principle. Though he could have pursued wealth and status, he was intelligent, educated, capable. He chose instead to live simply. His possessions were few, his needs were modest, and yet he described his life as blessed, as filled with pleasure, as enviable. Not because he had everything, but because he wanted nothing more than what he had. There is a letter attributed to Epicurus in which he writes about the pleasure of simple food. He says that when he has bread and water, he rivals Zeus in happiness. When he has a bit of cheese, it is a feast. This is not deprivation, this is freedom. Freedom from the need for luxury, from dependence on external circumstances, from the anxiety of maintaining a certain standard of living. When our happiness depends on simple things that are easily obtained, we are secure. When it depends on rare and expensive things, we are vulnerable. Every fluctuation in fortune threatens us. Every change in circumstances might strip away what we have built our happiness upon. But if our happiness is built on appreciation for simple food, friendship, thought, beauty, things that are available in almost any circumstance, then we are resilient. We can maintain our peace regardless of what happens around us. This resilience is worth more than any amount of wealth. It is the true treasure, the real security, and it is available to all of us right now without needing to change our external circumstances. We need only to change our understanding, our values, our attention. Let us think about attention for a moment, because this is crucial. We have limited attention. We cannot focus on everything at once. What we choose to attend to shapes our experience. If we focus on what we lack, we will feel poor, no matter how much we have. If we focus on what we have, we will feel rich, even if we have little. Epicurus invites us to direct our attention toward what is good in our lives, not in a forced, artificial way, not by denying real problems, but by consciously choosing to notice what is working, what is pleasant, what is worthy of appreciation. The mind has a natural bias toward noticing problems, threats, things that are wrong. This made sense in our evolutionary past, when survival depended on detecting danger. But in modern life, this bias often makes us miserable, causing us to overlook the good while fixating on the bad. By deliberately practicing gratitude, by noticing simple pleasures, by appreciating what we have, we counteract this bias. We train our minds to see more completely, to register not just threats and problems, but also joys and blessings. And this changes our subjective experience. We begin to feel that life is good, that we are fortunate, that we have enough. This is not self-deception. It is accurate perception, both. The problems and the pleasures are real. The question is where we put our emphasis, what we allow to dominate our awareness. Epicurus suggests that if we want to be happy, we should emphasize the good, not by ignoring the bad, but by giving the good its due weight. In the garden, they practiced this together. They would share meals and deliberately savor the food, the company, the conversation. They would walk together and notice the beauty of nature. They would study together and delight in learning, in understanding, in the pleasure of thought. These practices were not luxuries or indulgences. They were the core of the philosophical life. They were how happiness was cultivated, and we can do the same. We can create practices that help us notice and appreciate what is good. Perhaps a moment before eating where we acknowledge the food, its source, its ability to nourish us. Perhaps a walk where we deliberately notice beauty, the color of leaves, the sound of birds, the feel of air on our skin. Perhaps time with friends where we are fully present, not distracted by phones or thoughts of elsewhere. These practices do not take away from productivity or achievement. If anything, they enhance it, because when we are not driven by desperation or lack, when we come from a place of sufficiency and peace, we work better, we make clearer decisions, we are more creative, we have more energy. The paradox is that by letting go of the frantic pursuit of more, we often end up with better outcomes than when we were striving desperately. Epicurus noticed this paradox. He observed that people who pursue pleasure directly often miss it, while people who pursue wisdom and virtue find pleasure as a byproduct. This is because true pleasure, the kind that lasts, that satisfies, that does not create new problems, comes from living well. And living well means understanding what truly matters, making choices aligned with that understanding, and cultivating qualities like friendship, simplicity, and self-sufficiency. When we live this way, pleasure arises naturally. We do not have to chase it. We do not have to manufacture it through stimulation or consumption. It is simply there, woven into the fabric of daily life. The pleasure of waking rested, the pleasure of stretching our bodies, the pleasure of morning light, the pleasure of work that engages us, the pleasure of rest when we are tired. These are small pleasures, easily overlooked, but they are constant, they are reliable, and when we learn to notice them, we discover that we are surrounded by richness. The alternative, pursuing intense pleasures, peak experiences, highs that require constant escalation, leads to exhaustion and disappointment. We become like addicts, needing more and more stimulation to feel anything, finding that ordinary life seems dull and empty. Epicurus warns against this path. He counsels moderation, sustainability, pleasures that can be repeated without diminishing returns. Think of the difference between eating a simple meal when hungry versus eating at a buffet with unlimited options. The simple meal, fully savored, can bring deep satisfaction. The buffet often leads to overeating, to feeling uncomfortably full, to regret. More is not better. Appropriate is better. Sufficient is better. This principle applies across life, not just to food. We might have a modest home that meets our needs, provides shelter, creates a sense of coziness. Or we might have a mansion with many rooms we never use, high maintenance costs, a sense of being overwhelmed by possessions. Which brings more peace? Often it is the smaller home, the simpler life, not because there is virtue in lack, but because there is freedom in not being burdened by excess. Epicurus's ideal was autarkia, self-sufficiency, not in the sense of needing no one else, but in the sense of needing little from external sources. When we have simple needs and the ability to meet them ourselves, we are free. We are not dependent on the whims of employers, the state of the economy, the opinions of others. We can walk away from situations that do not serve us. We can make choices based on our values rather than our needs. This self-sufficiency is liberating in a profound way. Most people feel trapped by their circumstances. They stay in jobs they hate because they need the money. They remain in unhealthy relationships because they fear being alone. They compromise their values because they feel they have no choice. But when our needs are simple and we know we can meet them in various ways, we have choice. We have power. We are free. And this freedom is not just theoretical. It has practical implications. If we live simply, we can save money even on a modest income. Those savings create a buffer, a cushion that allows us to take risks, to leave situations that harm us, to pursue opportunities that align with our values. We are no longer living paycheck to paycheck, desperate to hold on to whatever we have. We have room to breathe, to choose, to live according to our own design. Epicurus himself demonstrated this freedom. When political circumstances in Athens became difficult, he simply withdrew. He did not fight for power or status. He did not try to change the system. He created an alternative, a space where he and his followers could live according to different principles. And that space became a refuge, not just for them, but for the ideas themselves, which survived and spread and continue to influence us today, more than 2,000 years later. The power of withdrawal, of stepping aside from conflicts we cannot win, of creating alternative spaces where different values can flourish. This is a recurring theme in Epicurean thought. We do not have to fight every battle. We do not have to change the whole world. We can simply live differently ourselves, and in doing so, demonstrate that another way is possible. This might seem passive or escapist, but it is actually quite radical. In a world that demands constant engagement, constant productivity, constant participation in systems that may not serve us well, choosing to step back, to live simply, to prioritize peace over achievement, this is an act of resistance. It is saying that we will not be defined by the values of the marketplace, that we will not sacrifice our lives on the altar of productivity, that we have the right to exist on our own terms. And when we do this, we often find that others are drawn to us. They see something in our lives, a quality of peace, of contentment, of freedom. that they long for themselves. They begin to question their own choices, their own values. They begin to consider that perhaps the conventional path is not the only path, that perhaps there are other ways to live that might bring more satisfaction. This is how ideas spread, how cultures shift. Not through force or argument, but through example. When people see someone living well in a different way, they become curious. They begin to experiment. They discover for themselves what works and what does not. And gradually, the culture changes. Epicurus did not try to impose his philosophy on anyone. He simply lived it and invited others to join him. Those who were interested came. Those who were not stayed away. There was no evangelism, no pressure, no judgment, just an open door and a different way of life visible for anyone who cared to look. We can embody this same approach. We do not need to convince anyone of anything. We simply live according to what we understand to be true. We prioritize peace over profit. We value friendship over status. We choose simplicity over complexity. And if others notice, if they are curious, we can share what we have learned. But we do not impose. We do not proselytize. We simply live. And in living this way, we find that we are not alone. There are others scattered throughout society who share these values. They may not call themselves Epicureans. They may not have any philosophical label at all, but they have somehow arrived at similar conclusions. That simple living brings more peace than striving for wealth. That friendship is more valuable than status. That the present moment is more real than future plans or past regrets. When we meet such people, there is a recognition, a sense of kinship. We do not have to explain ourselves. We understand each other. And these connections, these friendships based on shared values rather than shared interests or circumstances, are among the most sustaining relationships we can have. They are the kind of friendships Epicurus valued most. He wrote that friendship dances around the world, calling us all to wake up to happiness. This is a beautiful image. Friendship as a messenger, a herald of joy, something that moves through human society, bringing light and warmth wherever it goes. And it reminds us that we are not meant to pursue happiness alone. We are meant to find it together, to share it, to multiply it through connection. In the garden, friends supported each other not just emotionally, but practically. If someone was ill, others cared for them. If someone needed help, it was given. This was not charity in a hierarchical sense, but mutual aid among equals. They recognized that circumstances can change, that any of them might need help at some point, and that supporting each other was both the right thing to do and the wise thing to do. This vision of mutual support challenges the dominant narrative of individual self-sufficiency. We are told that we should be independent, that needing others is weakness, that we should be able to take care of ourselves. But this is a lonely way to live. It isolates us, makes us vulnerable, denies the reality of our interdependence. Epicurus offers a different model, a network of friends who support each other, who share resources and knowledge and care, who create together a life that none of them could create alone. This is not dependence in a negative sense, because it is reciprocal. Everyone gives and everyone receives. Everyone contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. And in this network of mutual support, everyone is more secure than they would be alone. If one person's resources fail, others can help. If someone is struggling, the community rallies. No one falls through the cracks because everyone is paying attention. Everyone cares. This is true security, not the security of wealth accumulated and hoarded, but the security of belonging, of knowing that we are not alone, that others will help us if we need it. This kind of community does not happen automatically. It requires intention, effort, trust. We have to be willing to be vulnerable, to ask for help when we need it, to offer help when we can give it. We have to be willing to invest time and energy in relationships, to show up for people even when it is inconvenient, to prioritize connection over individual achievement. But when we do this, we create something beautiful. We create spaces where people can relax, where they do not have to perform or compete, where they are valued simply for being themselves. We create the garden, not as a physical place, but as a quality of relationship, a way of being together. And this ultimately is what Epicurus offers us, not a set of doctrines to memorize, not a system to implement, but an invitation to live differently, an invitation to question what we have been taught about success and happiness, an invitation to experiment with simplicity, with friendship, with present moment awareness, an invitation to discover for ourselves whether these teachings are true, whether they actually lead to the peace they promise. The only way to know is to try, to take one principle, perhaps the idea of limiting desires to what is necessary, and apply it, to notice what happens, to see whether life becomes simpler, more peaceful, more satisfying, and if it does, to continue, to go deeper, to let the philosophy infuse more areas of life. This is not an all-or-nothing proposition. We do not have to abandon our lives and join a commune. We do not have to adopt every aspect of Epicurean philosophy. We simply take what resonates, what feels true, what seems useful. We experiment, we learn, we adjust, and gradually we find our own way, guided by these ancient principles, but adapted to our own circumstances, our own personalities, our own understanding. Epicurus himself encouraged this individualized approach. He did not insist that everyone follow exactly the same path. He recognized that people are different, that circumstances vary, that wisdom lies in applying general principles to specific situations. What matters is not rigid adherence to rules, but understanding the underlying principles and using them to navigate our own lives. The underlying principle, always, is the pursuit of peace. Not peace at any cost, not peace through avoidance of all difficulty, but peace as the fruit of wise living. Peace that comes from understanding what we can control and what we cannot. Peace that comes from valuing what truly matters and letting go of what does not. Peace that comes from friendships rooted in genuine affection. Peace that comes from simple pleasures, sustainably enjoyed. This peace is not dramatic. It does not make for exciting stories. It is quiet, steady, reliable. It is the peace of a life well lived, a mind well ordered, a heart well tended. It is available to us here now, in this very moment, if we are willing to release our grip on everything that disturbs it. As we continue to rest here, as our bodies settle into stillness and our minds drift towards sleep, we might notice how simple this moment actually is. We are lying down, we are breathing, we are safe, the room is quiet. There is nothing we need to do right now, nothing we need to achieve, nothing we need to become. We can simply be. This is the ground of peace, the recognition that in this moment, just as it is, there is enough. We are enough. Everything that needs to be here is here. Everything that needs to happen is happening. The breath flows in and out without our effort. The heart beats without our direction. Life continues, moment by moment, without requiring our constant intervention. Epicurus invites us to trust this process, to relax into it, to stop trying so hard to control everything. He invites us to notice that most of what we worry about never happens, that most of what we chase does not bring the satisfaction we expect, that most of what we think we need, we do not actually need. He invites us to simplify, to let go, to rest. And in this rest, in this letting go, we discover something surprising. We discover that we feel lighter. We discover that the burdens we have been carrying were largely self-imposed. We discover that peace was always available, always here, obscured only by our own mental activity, our own striving, our own refusal to accept what is. This acceptance is not resignation. It is not giving up on improving our lives or working toward goals. It is simply the recognition that our well-being is not dependent on those improvements or achievements. We can work toward them if we choose, but from a place of peace rather than desperation, from sufficiency rather than lack. When we work from this place, our efforts are more effective. We are not driven by fear or compulsion. We are not willing to sacrifice our integrity or our peace for short-term gains. We can think clearly, choose wisely, act effectively. And paradoxically, we often achieve more than when we were striving desperately because we are not in our own way. This is the wisdom of Wu Wei in Taoism. Effortless action, action that flows from understanding rather than force. And it has parallels in Epicurean thought. When we understand what truly matters, when we are at peace with ourselves, our actions become simpler, more direct, more effective. We do not waste energy on what does not serve us. We do not create unnecessary complexity. We simply do what needs to be done in the simplest way possible. And this simplicity extends to how we think about our lives, how we make decisions, how we relate to others. We do not need elaborate strategies or complex plans. We need only to keep returning to the basic questions. What do I truly need? What brings genuine peace? What relationships nourish me? What desires disturb my tranquility? These questions, asked honestly and answered clearly, guide us toward a simpler, more peaceful life. They help us see through the confusion and complexity that culture imposes on us. They bring us back to what is essential, what is real, what actually matters. Epicurus believed that philosophy should be practical, that it should help us live better lives, not just think more sophisticated thoughts. He had no patience for abstract speculation that did not lead to improved well-being. The test of any philosophical teaching, he believed, was whether it made people happier, more peaceful, more free. And by that standard, his philosophy has endured. For more than 2,000 years, people have found in his teachings a path to peace, a way to navigate the difficulties of life without being overwhelmed by them. The specific circumstances have changed. We face different challenges than ancient Athenians did, but the underlying human condition remains the same. We still struggle with desire and fear. We still seek happiness and peace. We still benefit from wisdom about how to live. What Epicurus offers is not a solution to all problems, not a guarantee of a perfect life, but a framework for thinking about what matters, for making choices that serve our well-being, for cultivating the qualities that lead to sustainable happiness. It is a gift freely given, asking nothing in return except that we consider it, test it, see if it helps. And if it does help, if we find that simplifying our lives brings peace, that limiting our desires reduces anxiety, that valuing friendship enriches our days, then we might share this discovery with others, not by preaching or proselytizing, but simply by living differently, by demonstrating through our own example that another way is possible. This is how wisdom spreads, not through force, but through attraction. People see someone living peacefully in a chaotic world, and they wonder how it is possible. They ask questions, they learn, they experiment, and gradually the wisdom propagates, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one life transformed at a time. Epicurus did not seek to change the world through political power or social revolution. He sought to change it one person at a time, by helping each individual find peace. And in a way, he succeeded more thoroughly than any conqueror or king. His name is still known, his ideas still influence, his garden, though long gone as a physical place, still exists wherever people gather to pursue wisdom, simplicity, and friendship. We can be part of that legacy. We can create our own gardens, literal or metaphorical. We can gather with friends to share simple meals and meaningful conversation. We can practice noticing and appreciating simple pleasures. We can experiment with living on less, wanting less, needing less. We can see what happens, what changes, what opens up. And as we do this, we might find that our lives become richer, even as they become simpler. We might find that we have more time, more energy, more peace. We might find that relationships deepen when we are not distracted by constant striving. We might find that simple pleasures, fully savored, bring more lasting satisfaction than expensive thrills that fade quickly. This is not a fantasy or an idealization. This is the lived experience of people who have taken these teachings seriously, who have applied them consistently, who have discovered for themselves that Epicurus was right. Happiness is simple. Peace is available. The good life does not require what we thought it required. It requires only wisdom, the wisdom to see clearly what we need and what we do not, what serves us and what disturbs us, what is within our control and what is not. This wisdom is not esoteric or difficult. It is simple, but simple does not mean easy. It requires practice, patience, persistence. It requires that we continually return to these questions, continually examine our choices, continually align our lives with our understanding. But unlike the endless striving that culture demands of us, this practice does not exhaust us. It renews us. Each time we return to simplicity, we feel lighter. Each time we let go of an unnecessary desire, we feel freer. Each time we appreciate what we have rather than longing for what we lack, we feel richer. This is the path Epicurus walked, and the path he invites us to walk with him. Not a path of deprivation or difficulty, but a path of peace, a path that recognizes our humanity, our needs, our capacity for joy. A path that does not demand that we be more than we are, but simply that we see clearly what we are and what we need. And what we need, it turns out, is so much less than we have been taught. We need food, water, shelter, safety. We need friendship, affection, belonging. We need to feel that our lives have meaning, that we matter, that we are part of something larger than ourselves. These needs are universal, and they can be met simply. Everything beyond these basics is optional. Not wrong, not forbidden, but optional. We can enjoy luxuries if they come easily, but we should not sacrifice our peace to obtain them. We can pursue achievements if they genuinely interest us, but we should not base our worth on them. We can accumulate possessions if we wish, but we should not become enslaved by them. This is the middle way that Epicurus proposes. Not ascetic denial of all pleasure, not hedonistic pursuit of every gratification, but a balanced approach that takes pleasure seriously. Enough to seek the kind that lasts, that satisfies, that does not create new problems. It is a philosophy of moderation, of wisdom, of careful attention to cause and effect. If we eat too much, we feel uncomfortable. If we pursue pleasures that harm us, we suffer the consequences. If we base our happiness on external circumstances, we become vulnerable to forces beyond our control. These are simple observations, empirically verifiable. We do not need to take them on faith. We can test them in our own experience. And when we test them, we find that they are true. We find that moderation feels better than excess. We find that simple pleasures are more reliable than complex ones. We find that inner peace is more valuable than external success. These discoveries are liberating. They free us from the tyranny of more, from the belief that we need things we do not actually need. Epicurus spent his life helping people make these discoveries. He taught not through abstract lectures, but through lived example, through community, through the daily practice of philosophy. In the garden, philosophy was not something you studied, it was something you lived. Every meal was an opportunity to practice gratitude and moderation. Every conversation was an opportunity to deepen friendship and understanding. Every challenge was an opportunity to apply wisdom. This integration of philosophy and life is what made Epicureanism powerful. It was not just a set of ideas to think about, but a complete way of living, tested and refined through daily practice. And what the practitioners discovered was that it worked. It really did lead to greater peace, greater happiness, greater freedom. The same can be true for us. If we take these teachings seriously, if we apply them consistently, if we allow them to shape our choices and our values, we will find that our lives change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, steadily, undeniably. We will find ourselves less anxious, less driven, less dissatisfied. We will find ourselves more present, more grateful, more content. And these changes will be sustainable because they are not based on external circumstances that might change, but on internal understanding that once gained cannot be lost. Once we truly understand that we do not need vast wealth to be happy, that understanding remains even if our financial situation changes. Once we truly understand that simple pleasures can bring deep satisfaction, we can access those pleasures regardless of what else is happening in our lives. This is the real security that Epicurus offers, not the security of guaranteed external circumstances, but the security of knowing that our peace does not depend on those circumstances. We can be happy whether we are rich or poor, famous or unknown, successful or struggling, because our happiness is rooted in something that cannot be taken away: our understanding, our values, our choices. As the night deepens, as our minds drift closer to sleep, we can rest in this understanding. We can let go of the worries and plans that usually occupy our thoughts. We can let go of the desires and fears that usually drive us. We can simply rest in the simple fact of being, breathing, existing. This moment is enough. This breath is enough. This life just as it is enough. Not perfect, not ideal, but enough. Sufficient, whole. And in recognizing its sufficiency, we find peace. Not the peace of having everything we want, but the peace of wanting only what we have. The peace of knowing that we already possess the essentials for happiness. Epicurus knew this peace. He lived in it, taught from it, shared it with everyone who came to his garden, seeking relief from the anxieties and disappointments of life. And his message to us across the centuries is simple: you can have this too. This peace is not reserved for philosophers or saints. It is available to everyone who is willing to see clearly, choose wisely, and live simply. The path is not hidden. The requirements are not mysterious. We need only to understand what we truly need, satisfy those needs in simple ways, and let go of everything else. We need only to value what cannot be taken from us: our friendships, our understanding, our capacity for appreciation, and not depend on what can be lost: wealth, status, external circumstances. When we live this way, we find that life becomes lighter. The burdens we thought we had to carry turn out to be optional. The struggles we thought were necessary turn out to be self-imposed. The happiness we thought was distant turns out to be here, now, available in this very moment, if we simply open our eyes to see it. This is the gift of Epicurus, the recognition that we already have what we need for happiness, that we are already standing in the midst of abundance, that we need only to notice it, appreciate it, rest in it. Nothing to chase, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. Simply this: the breath flowing, the heart beating, the mind aware, the body at rest. In this simple presence, free from striving and worry, we touch the peace that Epicurus spoke of, and we realize that it was always here, always available, obscured only by our own mental activity, our own restless seeking, our own refusal to accept the sufficiency of what is. Now finally we can rest. We can let go. We can allow ourselves to be exactly as we are in this moment without needing to be different or better or more. We can trust that we are enough, that this is enough, that everything we need for peace is already present. Epicurus whispers to us across time: be at peace. You have what you need. You are sufficient. Life is simpler than you think, and happiness is closer than you imagine. Let go of what disturbs you. Value what endures. Find joy in the simple and the immediate. This is the path to peace. This is the way. And so we rest, held by these ancient truths, soothed by this timeless wisdom, drifting into sleep with the knowledge that we are enough, that we have enough, that this moment is enough. The striving can cease, the seeking can end. We are home. In the heart of philosophical wisdom, there lies a particular kind of quiet that is unlike any other form of silence. It is not the silence of absence, not the mere cessation of noise, but rather a fullness of peace that comes from understanding. This is the quiet that Epicurus cultivated in his garden, and it is the quiet that can be cultivated in our own lives if we are willing to listen to what ancient wisdom has to teach us about the texture of human existence. When Epicurus spoke of pleasure, he was speaking of something far more subtle than what we commonly understand by that word. In our time, pleasure has become associated with intensity, with stimulation, with experiences that take us out of ourselves. We seek pleasure in entertainment, in consumption, in activities that distract us from the ordinary rhythm of life. But this is not what Epicurus meant at all. The pleasure he valued most highly was what he called katastematic pleasure, the pleasure of a stable state, the pleasure of not being in pain, not being disturbed, not being anxious. It is the pleasure of having eaten enough when you were hungry, not the pleasure of eating more and more. It is the pleasure of being warm when you were cold, not the pleasure of excessive heat. It is the pleasure of safety after danger has passed, of rest after work has been completed, of peace after conflict has been resolved. This kind of pleasure is not exciting. It does not create stories worth telling. It does not photograph well or translate into social media posts. It is simply the quiet satisfaction of needs met, of balance restored, of equilibrium maintained. And yet, Epicurus argued, this is the highest form of pleasure because it can be sustained indefinitely without creating new problems, without leading to excess, without transforming into its opposite. Think about the moments in your own life when you have felt this kind of pleasure. Perhaps after a long day of work, when you finally sit down and the tension drains from your body. Perhaps when you have been worried about something and learn that everything is actually fine. Perhaps on a quiet morning when you wake naturally without an alarm and lie in bed for a few moments, just feeling rested and safe. These moments are easy to overlook because they are not dramatic. We tend to notice the peaks and valleys of experience, the highs of excitement and the lows of distress, but we often miss the plateaus of simple contentment. Yet these plateaus, these stretches of undramatic peace, are where most of life actually happens. They are the substrate of existence, the background against which all the dramatic events play out. Epicurus invites us to pay attention to this substrate, to value it, to protect it. He suggests that most of what we do in pursuit of pleasure actually disturbs this peaceful state rather than enhancing it. We seek excitement, intensity, novelty, and in doing so we create restlessness, dissatisfaction, a constant need for more stimulation. We trade the reliable pleasure of peace for the unreliable pleasure of excitement, and we end up less happy overall. This is a difficult teaching to accept. In a culture that worships excitement, that measures the quality of life by the intensity of experiences, that encourages us to constantly seek the next thrill. But if we examine our own experience honestly, we may find that Epicurus is right. The most intense pleasures often leave us feeling depleted afterward. The most exciting experiences often create a letdown when they end. The constant pursuit of novelty leaves us chronically dissatisfied with the ordinary. In contrast, when we cultivate the ability to find pleasure in simple, repeatable experiences, a good meal, a conversation with a friend, a walk in nature, a moment of quiet reflection, we become less dependent on circumstances beyond our control. We can access pleasure more reliably, more sustainably, more deeply. We are not constantly seeking the next high because we have learned to appreciate the steady state of contentment. This is not to say that we should never seek intense experiences or that all excitement is problematic. Epicurus is not advocating for a life of bland uniformity. He is simply suggesting that we should be aware of the costs of intensity, that we should not pursue it compulsively, that we should value the peaceful baseline of existence and protect it from unnecessary disturbance. In practical terms, this might mean choosing activities that leave us feeling restored rather than depleted. It might mean noticing when we are seeking stimulation out of boredom or restlessness rather than genuine interest. It might mean creating regular practices that help us return to a state of calm, meditation, gentle exercise, time in nature, meaningful conversation. It also means being very careful about what we expose ourselves to on a regular basis. The Stoics spoke about the importance of guarding the mind, of being selective about what we allow in. Epicurus would agree. If we constantly fill our minds with alarming news, with stories of violence and conflict, with images of luxury and excess, we disturb our peace. We create desires and fears that did not exist before. We We make it harder to appreciate what we have. This is not about sticking our heads in the sand or ignoring reality. It is about recognizing that we have limited capacity, that our nervous systems were not designed to process the amount of information and stimulation that modern life throws at us, that we need to create boundaries to protect our peace. In the garden, there was a natural boundary created by physical withdrawal from the city. In our lives, we need to create similar boundaries, perhaps not physical, but temporal and attentional. Times when we step away from the constant stream of information, when we disconnect from devices and demands, when we simply exist without agenda or purpose beyond being present. These boundary-protected times allow us to return to ourselves, to remember who we are beneath all the roles and responsibilities, to reconnect with the simple pleasure of existence. And from this place of reconnection, we can engage with the world more effectively, more wisely, more peacefully. Epicurus understood that peace is not something we achieve once and then possess forever. It is something we practice, something we return to, something we cultivate continually. Every day brings new challenges, new temptations to disturb our equilibrium, new opportunities to practice choosing peace over excitement, simplicity over complexity, contentment over striving. The practice is gentle but consistent. It does not require heroic effort or dramatic transformation. It requires only that we keep returning to the basic questions. What do I actually need right now? What would serve my peace? What choice would I make if I were not driven by fear or desire, but simply choosing from a place of clarity? These questions, asked regularly, gradually shape our lives. We begin to make different choices. We begin to notice patterns that create suffering and patterns that create peace. We begin to trust our own understanding rather than constantly seeking external validation or direction. This trust in our own understanding is crucial. Epicurus did not want followers who blindly accepted his teachings. He wanted people who tested the ideas in their own experience, who discovered for themselves what led to peace and what led to disturbance. He wanted to cultivate discernment, not obedience, and so he encouraged his students to question everything, to examine their beliefs, to notice the results of their choices. If a particular desire consistently led to disappointment, perhaps it was an unnecessary desire that could be released. If a particular activity consistently disturbed their peace, perhaps it could be avoided or minimized. If a particular relationship drained their energy, perhaps it needed to be reconsidered. This empirical approach to philosophy, testing ideas through lived experience, is very practical and very accessible. We do not need specialized knowledge or training. We simply need to pay attention, to notice cause and effect, to learn from our own lives. Over time, this practice of attention reveals patterns. We see that certain simple things reliably bring satisfaction, while certain complex pursuits reliably bring frustration. We see that times of quiet restore us, while times of overstimulation deplete us. We see that genuine connection nourishes us, while superficial interaction leaves us feeling empty. These observations, accumulated over time, become wisdom. Not wisdom as abstract knowledge, but wisdom as lived understanding, as practical skill in the art of living well. And this wisdom, once embodied, becomes natural. We no longer have to consciously deliberate about every choice. We simply act from understanding, and our actions naturally support our peace. This is the goal of Epicurean practice, not to create a set of rigid rules to follow, but to cultivate understanding that guides us naturally toward choices that serve our well-being. It is a process of becoming wise, becoming whole, becoming integrated in our values and our actions. And the beautiful thing is that this process is inherently rewarding. Each step toward greater simplicity brings relief. Each release of an unnecessary desire creates spaciousness. Each moment of genuine appreciation fills us with a quiet joy. We do not have to wait until we have achieved perfect wisdom to benefit from the practice. The benefits come immediately, with each small choice aligned with peace. This immediate feedback, The sense of relief, of rightness, of coming home to ourselves, reinforces the practice. We do not continue out of obligation or discipline, but because we like how it feels. We like the peace, we like the simplicity, we like the freedom from constant striving and worry. And as this preference for peace becomes stronger, many things that once seemed attractive lose their appeal. We are less tempted by possessions we do not need, because we have learned that they create more burden than joy. We are less interested in status and recognition, because we have discovered that they do not actually make us happier. We are less driven to fill every moment with activity, because we have come to value the spaciousness of unscheduled time. These shifts happen naturally, without force or struggle. We simply notice that our values are changing, that what we want is changing, that who we are is changing, and the person we are becoming is calmer, simpler, freer than the person we were. Epicurus would say that this is the natural result of living philosophically, of bringing awareness to our choices, of aligning our actions with our understanding of what truly serves us. It is not a matter of becoming someone else, but of becoming more fully ourselves, freed from the conditioning and confusion that once obscured our natural wisdom. This natural wisdom, the innate capacity to recognize what serves our well-being, is present in everyone, but it is often buried under layers of social conditioning, marketing messages, peer pressure, and habitual patterns. The practice of Epicurean philosophy is like an excavation, gradually removing these layers to reveal the wisdom that was always there. As this wisdom emerges, we find that we trust ourselves more. We are less swayed by what others think we should want or do. We are less vulnerable to manipulation by advertisers or cultural narratives about success and happiness. We have our own compass, our own sense of what is true and valuable, and we follow it. This self-trust is deeply liberating. So much anxiety comes from doubting ourselves, from thinking we should want what others want, from fearing that we are missing out on something. When we trust our own understanding, when we know from experience what brings us peace, these anxieties lose their power. We are content with our own path, even if it looks different from others' paths. And often, our path does look different. In a culture of excess, simplicity stands out. In a culture of busyness, spaciousness seems strange. In a culture of striving, contentment appears suspicious. People may not understand our choices. They may question why we are not pursuing more, achieving more, acquiring more. Epicurus faced similar incomprehension. Why would an intelligent, capable person choose to live so simply? Why withdraw from politics and public life? Why be satisfied with bread and water when more was available? These questions reflected the questioner's values, their beliefs about what makes life worthwhile. But Epicurus knew what brought him peace, and he was not swayed by others' incomprehension. He lived according to his own understanding, and he invited others to discover their own understanding through experimentation and reflection. He did not argue or defend. He simply lived, and his life was its own defense, its own argument for the value of his philosophy. We can take the same approach. We do not need to justify our choices to others. We do not need to convince anyone that simplicity is valuable or that contentment is worth more than achievement. We simply live according to our own understanding, and our peace speaks for itself. Over time, as people see that we are genuinely content, genuinely at peace, some may become curious. They may ask how we manage to be so calm in a chaotic world, how we can be satisfied with so little when everyone else seems to need so much. And then, if they are genuinely interested, we can share what we have learned, not as a prescription they must follow, but as possibilities they might explore. This gentle approach, living by example rather than preaching, inviting rather than insisting, is very much in the Epicurean spirit. It respects each person's autonomy, their right to discover their own path, their capacity to learn from their own experience. It does not create hierarchies of knowing, with teachers above students, but recognizes that we are all learning, all discovering, all finding our way. And in this spirit of mutual exploration, friendships deepen. We are not relating to each other as expert and novice, but as fellow travelers sharing insights, supporting each other, learning together. This is the quality of friendship that Epicurus valued, not based on what we can get from each other, but on genuine affection, shared values, mutual support. Such friendships are rare in a world where relationships are often transactional, where we evaluate people by their usefulness, where we network rather than connect. But they are possible, and they are among the greatest sources of happiness available to us. When we have even one friend with whom we can be completely honest, completely ourselves, with whom we share not just activities but values and understanding, we are rich beyond measure. Epicurus wrote that it is better to be free alone than in chains with many companions. This points to the importance of genuine connection over mere socializing. A life filled with shallow relationships is lonelier than a life with one deep friendship. Quality matters more than quantity. Depth matters more than breadth, and the depth of friendship is cultivated in the same way as peace, through presence, through honesty, through showing up. We cannot manufacture deep friendship quickly. It grows over time, through shared experiences, through vulnerability, through seeing and being seen. It requires that we let down our masks, that we stop performing, that we risk being known. This risk is worth taking. The alternative, maintaining a polished exterior while remaining unknown, is a kind of prison. We may be safe from judgment, but we are also isolated, cut off from genuine connection. We are surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone. Epicurus invites us out of this prison. He invites us to be real, to be vulnerable, to show up as we actually are, rather than as we think we should be. And when we do this, we discover that we are not rejected but welcomed, that others are relieved to encounter someone who is genuine, that our authenticity gives others permission to be authentic as well. This mutual authenticity creates a particular quality of trust and ease. We are not watching our words, monitoring our image, trying to impress. We are simply present, simply ourselves, simply enjoying each other's company. And in this simplicity, there is a deep pleasure that no amount of entertainment or stimulation can provide. The pleasure of being known and accepted, the pleasure of knowing and accepting another, the pleasure of conversation that goes beneath the surface, that touches on what really matters, that leaves us feeling more connected to ourselves and to each other. This is pleasure in the Epicurean sense, sustainable, meaningful, enriching, and it costs nothing. It requires no wealth, no status, no special circumstances. It requires only willingness to be present, to be honest, to care. These capacities are available to everyone. No one is too poor to offer them. No one is excluded from accessing them. This universality of Epicurean philosophy is significant. Unlike philosophies that require leisure time for study, or wealth to pursue certain practices, or social status to participate in certain institutions, Epicureanism asks only that we think clearly and choose wisely. Anyone can do this, regardless of their circumstances. A slave could practice Epicurean philosophy as effectively as a free person. A poor person could be as Epicurean as a rich one. What mattered was not external circumstances, but internal understanding. Not what one had, but how one related to what one had. This made Epicureanism radical in its time and makes it radical now. It refuses to accept that happiness is the privilege of the fortunate few, that peace is available only to those whose lives are easy, that contentment requires perfect circumstances. It insists that anyone, anywhere, in any condition can find peace through understanding, simplicity, and friendship. This is both encouraging and challenging. Encouraging because it means we do not have to wait for our circumstances to improve before we can be happy. Challenging because it means we cannot blame our circumstances for our unhappiness. The responsibility is ours, not to change our external conditions, which may be beyond our control, but to change our understanding and our choices, which are always within our control. Epicurus lived this teaching. When faced with illness, he did not rage against fate or fall into despair. He focused on what he could still appreciate: his memories, his friendships, his understanding. He maintained his peace even as his body failed, demonstrating that happiness is indeed independent of external circumstances, that it is a quality of mind that can be cultivated and maintained regardless of what is happening in the body or the world. This is perhaps the ultimate test of any philosophy. Does it hold up when things are difficult? Does it provide genuine support in times of crisis? Can it transform suffering, if not eliminate it? Epicurus's own life suggests that yes, this philosophy can sustain us even in the darkest times, even when we face pain or loss or death itself. The key is in how we frame our experience, what we choose to focus on, where we direct our attention. Even in pain, there are moments without pain. Even in loss, there are things we still have. Even facing death, there is life still being lived in this moment. If we can notice these things, appreciate them, rest in them, we can find pockets of peace even in difficult circumstances. This is not toxic positivity, not denying the reality of suffering, not pretending that everything is fine when it is not. It is simply the practice of noticing what is good as well as what is difficult, of holding both realities simultaneously, of not allowing suffering to completely eclipse all other aspects of experience. Epicurus practiced this balance. He acknowledged pain while also acknowledging pleasure. He recognized loss while also appreciating what remained. He faced death while also valuing life. He was realistic but not pessimistic, clear-eyed but not despairing, and this balance allowed him to maintain his peace even in conditions that might have destroyed someone without philosophical training. This is what philosophy is for, according to Epicurus, not for abstract speculation or intellectual entertainment, but for precisely these moments when life is difficult, when we need support, when we need wisdom to guide us through darkness. A philosophy that cannot help us in times of crisis is not worth having. A philosophy that only works when everything is going well is no philosophy at all. Epicurean philosophy works. It has worked for thousands of years, for millions of people, in countless difficult circumstances. It works because it is based on clear observation of how pleasure and pain actually function, how desires actually operate, how happiness actually arises. It is not idealistic or utopian. It is practical and realistic, grounded in the actual experience of being human. And it invites us, each of us, to test it for ourselves, not to accept it on faith or authority, but to experiment with its principles and see what happens, to try living more simply and notice whether we feel freer, to try limiting our desires and notice whether we feel more content, to try deepening our friendships and notice whether we feel happier. This experimental approach honors our intelligence and our autonomy. It trusts that we can learn from our own experience, that we can distinguish between what serves us and what does not, that we have the capacity to become wise through attentive living. And as we conduct these experiments, as we pay attention to the results of our choices, we accumulate wisdom, not quickly, not all at once, but gradually, steadily, reliably. Each insight builds on previous ones. Each practice reinforces earlier practices. Each moment of clarity makes the next moment of clarity more likely. This is how transformation happens, not through dramatic revelation or sudden enlightenment, but through patient, persistent practice over time. It is like learning any skill. At first we are clumsy and conscious of every movement, but with practice, the skill becomes natural, automatic, integrated into who we are. Living philosophically is a skill. Making choices aligned with peace is a skill. Noticing and releasing unnecessary desires is a skill. These skills can be learned by anyone willing to practice, and the practice itself is pleasant because each small success brings relief, brings peace, brings us closer to the life we actually want to live. Epicurus is not asking us to become someone we are not. He is not demanding that we achieve some impossible standard. He is simply inviting us to notice what actually makes us happy and to do more of that, while noticing what disturbs our peace and doing less of This is not complicated. It does not require special knowledge or training. It requires only honesty, attention, and willingness to learn. And the rewards are immediate. The first time we decline a purchase we do not actually need and notice the relief of not spending the money, not acquiring another thing to maintain, we taste freedom. The first time we have a genuine conversation rather than engaging in small talk, we taste connection. The first time we sit in quiet, appreciation, rather than seeking the next stimulation, we taste peace. These tastes, these small experiences of what is possible, motivate us to continue. We do not continue out of discipline or obligation, but because we want more of this feeling, more of this quality of experience. We are following pleasure in the truest sense, not chasing excitement, but cultivating sustainable contentment. And as this contentment deepens, it transforms our relationship to everything. We are less easily disturbed because we are grounded in something stable. We are less reactive because we are not constantly on edge. We are less defensive because we are secure in ourselves. We are less grasping because we recognize that we already have enough. This transformation is not visible from the outside. We do not suddenly look different or act dramatically differently, but internally, everything has shifted. Where there was anxiety, there is now calm. Where there was craving, there is now contentment. Where there was fear, there is now acceptance. And from this internal shift, a different quality of life emerges. A life lived from peace rather than from striving. A life oriented toward what genuinely serves us rather than toward what we have been taught to want. A life that feels like ours, authentically chosen, deeply satisfying. This is what Epicurus promises, and this is what he delivers to those willing to take his teachings seriously. The promise is simple but profound. You can be happy, not in some distant future when everything is perfect, but now in this life as it actually is. You can be at peace. You can be content. You can enjoy your days rather than enduring them while waiting for something better. All it requires is understanding of what you truly need, understanding of how desires actually function, understanding of where genuine pleasure comes from. And this understanding is available through attention, through experiment, through honest reflection on your own experience. Epicurus is our guide, but we must walk the path ourselves. No one can do it for us. No one can give us peace as a gift. We must cultivate it ourselves through our own choices, our own practice, our own gradual awakening to what serves us and what does not. But we do not walk alone. We have the wisdom of the tradition to guide us. We have fellow seekers to support us. We have our own capacity for clear seeing and wise choosing. And we have time, each day offering new opportunities to practice, to learn, to return to peace when we have strayed from it. The path is gentle. It does not demand perfection. It allows for missteps, for learning, for gradual progress, rather than immediate transformation. It meets us where we are and invites us forward one small step at a time. And each step, no matter how small, brings us closer to the life we seek, the peace we long for, the freedom we know is possible. Epicurus walked this path himself before teaching it to others. He knew from his own experience that it led to happiness. He was not offering theory or speculation, but practical wisdom tested in the laboratory of his own life. And what he discovered was that happiness is simpler than we think, closer than we imagine, more accessible than we believe. It is here, now, in this moment. It is available through the simplest things: a breath, a moment of stillness, a recognition of sufficiency. We need only to notice, to appreciate, to rest. And in that noticing, that appreciation, that rest, we find what we have been seeking all along: peace, simplicity, contentment, freedom from the endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction, freedom to just be without needing to become anything more, without needing to have anything more, without needing to do anything more. Just this, just now, just us, breathing, alive, sufficient. This is the heart of Epicurean wisdom. This is what the garden cultivated. This is what Epicurus offers us across the centuries: the possibility of peace, the practice of simplicity, the pleasure of just being alive. Nothing more is needed. Everything is already here, and so we rest, held by this ancient understanding, soothed by this timeless truth. We are enough. We have enough. This moment is enough. All the striving can cease. All the seeking can end. We are home, in the deep stillness of contemplation, where the mind finally releases its grip on the endless parade of concerns and considerations. There emerges a clarity that is both simple and profound. This is the clarity that Epicurus cultivated, and it is this clarity that allows us to see through the confusion that typically clouds our thinking about happiness and how to achieve it. We tend to believe that happiness is complicated, that it requires careful planning, significant resources, the right circumstances. We tend to believe that it is something we must earn or deserve, something that will come to us if we work hard enough, achieve enough, become enough. But this belief itself creates suffering because it places happiness always in the future, always conditional, always dependent on factors that may or may not align. Epicurus offers a radically different view. Happiness is not complicated, not distant, not conditional. It is available now in this moment through simple means. The complication comes not from the requirements for happiness, which are minimal, but from the misconceptions we hold about those requirements, the false beliefs that lead us to pursue things that do not actually make us happy. Consider how much energy we expend pursuing goals that, once achieved, do not bring the satisfaction we expected. We work toward a promotion, and when we get it, the pleasure lasts perhaps a few days before we are looking toward the next promotion. We save for a purchase, and when we make it, the initial excitement quickly fades into familiarity. We seek recognition or approval, and even when we receive it, it does not fill the emptiness we thought it would fill. This pattern repeats throughout our lives, yet we rarely step back to question it. We assume that the problem is that we have not yet achieved the right goal, acquired the right thing, earned the right recognition. We assume that next time will be different, that the next achievement will finally bring lasting satisfaction. But it never does, because the issue is not with which goal we choose, but with the entire framework of seeking happiness through achievement and acquisition. Epicurus points out this flaw in our thinking. He shows us that the pleasure of achievement is fleeting precisely because it is dependent on external circumstances that are inherently unstable. We can lose what we have gained. Others can acquire more than we have. The goalposts can shift. What seemed like enough yesterday is no longer enough today. We are trapped on a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster, but never actually arriving anywhere. The way off this treadmill is not to run faster or to choose a different treadmill, but to step off entirely, to recognize that lasting happiness cannot come from external achievement or acquisition, because these are by their nature impermanent and subject to comparison. Lasting happiness comes from internal states that are not dependent on external circumstances. Understanding, wisdom, contentment, appreciation. These internal states can be cultivated. They are skills that can be developed through practice, and unlike external achievements, they become stronger and more stable over time. The more we practice contentment, the easier it becomes to feel content. The more we practice appreciation, the more we notice things to appreciate. The more we practice wisdom, the clearer our thinking becomes. And the beautiful thing is that these practices are inherently pleasurable. Feeling content feels good. Noticing things to appreciate feels good. Thinking clearly feels good. We do not need to motivate ourselves with distant rewards. The practice itself is rewarding. This is a key insight. The path to happiness is itself pleasant. We do not have to suffer now in order to be happy later. We can be happy now in the very process of cultivating the understanding and practices that will deepen our happiness. The I means and the end are aligned. Epicurus understood this alignment. He did not teach a philosophy of delayed gratification or self-denial. He taught a philosophy of intelligent pleasure-seeking, of understanding what actually brings pleasure and pursuing that. And what he discovered was that the most reliable sources of pleasure are simple, sustainable, and immediately available. The pleasure of friendship. We can enjoy this today, right now, by reaching out to someone we care about. The pleasure of learning. We can enjoy this by being curious, by noticing, by thinking. The pleasure of simplicity. We can enjoy this by letting go of something unnecessary, by choosing the simple over the complex. The pleasure of presence. We can enjoy this by being here now, fully engaged with this moment, rather than mentally elsewhere. These pleasures are not impressive. They do not make for good stories or social media posts. They do not demonstrate achievement or success, but they are real, sustainable, and deeply satisfying, and they are available to everyone, regardless of circumstances. This democratization of happiness is central to Epicurean thought. Happiness is not the privilege of the wealthy or the fortunate. It is not reserved for those with perfect lives or extraordinary abilities. It is available to anyone willing to understand how pleasure and pain actually work, how desires actually function, how happiness actually arises. And this understanding is not esoteric or difficult. It is based on simple observation of our own experience. When we pay attention, we notice that simple pleasures are more reliable than complex ones, that modest needs are easier to satisfy than extravagant ones, that genuine relationships bring more happiness than superficial ones. We notice that much of what we thought we needed, we do not actually need. We notice that much of what we were chasing does not actually satisfy. These observations, accumulated over time, form the basis of wisdom, not wisdom as abstract knowledge, but wisdom as practical understanding of how to live well. And this wisdom, once embodied, naturally guides our choices toward what serves our happiness and away from what undermines it. We stop doing things that disturb our peace, not because we should or because we are being disciplined, but because we clearly see that they do not serve us. We stop pursuing desires that lead to disappointment, not because we are being ascetic, but because we prefer the stable pleasure of contentment to the volatile cycle of craving and satisfaction. We stop basing our worth on external validation, not because we are being stoic, but because we have found something more reliable within ourselves. This is the natural progression of wisdom. As we see more clearly, we choose more wisely. As we choose more wisely, we suffer less and enjoy more. As we suffer less and enjoy more, we become more peaceful. And from this peace, we are able to see even more clearly, creating a virtuous cycle that deepens over time. Epicurus lived within this cycle. His peace was evident to all who knew him. Even in illness, even facing death, he maintained an equanimity that demonstrated the power of his philosophy. He was not merely teaching ideas, he was embodying a way of being that was so attractive, so compelling, that people wanted to learn his secret. And the secret, it turned out, was not secret at all. It was simply the willingness to see clearly and to align one's life with that clear seeing, to recognize that most desires are unnecessary and bring more trouble than joy, to understand that death is not to be feared because it is not an experience we will have, to appreciate simple pleasures and to build one's happiness on foundations that cannot be shaken. These teachings, transmitted through his writings and through the lived example of the community in the garden, have survived for over 2 millennia. They have survived because they are true in a deep sense, not just logically consistent or philosophically sophisticated, but true to the actual experience of being human, true in that they accurately describe how to find happiness and how to avoid unnecessary suffering. This truth is testable. We can try living according to these principles and see what happens. We can experiment with simplifying our desires, with practicing appreciation, with deepening our friendships. We can notice whether these experiments lead to greater peace or greater disturbance, to more happiness or more suffering. And in noticing, we verify for ourselves whether Epicurus was right. Most people who seriously engage with Epicurean philosophy find that yes, he was right. Simplicity does bring peace. Appreciation does increase happiness. Genuine friendship is more valuable than wealth or status. These are not just pleasant ideas, they are practical realities that can transform our experience of life. But knowing this intellectually is not the same as embodying it. We can agree that simplicity is valuable while still cluttering our lives with unnecessary possessions. We can agree that friendship is important while still neglecting our relationships. We can agree that appreciation increases happiness while still focusing on what we lack. The gap between knowing and doing is where most of us live. We know what would serve us, but we do not consistently choose it. We are pulled by habit, by social pressure, by the momentum of our established patterns. We mean to simplify, but we keep acquiring. We mean to appreciate, but we keep complaining. We mean to invest in friendship, but we keep getting distracted. Epicurus understood this gap. He knew that intellectual understanding alone is not sufficient. We need practice. We need community. We need regular reminders of what we know, but easily forget. This is why the garden was not just a place to learn philosophy, but a place to live it, surrounded by others who were trying to do the same thing. We may not have access to such a community, but we can create practices that serve the same function. Daily reminders of what we value, regular practices of appreciation, scheduled time with friends, periodic simplification of our possessions and commitments. These practices create structure that supports our intentions, that helps us close the gap between knowing and doing. And each time we act on what we know, each time we choose simplicity over complexity or presence over distraction, we strengthen the connection between understanding and action. We make it more likely that we will choose wisely next time. We train ourselves in the art of living well. This training is gentle but persistent. We do not expect perfection. We do not berate ourselves for falling short. We simply notice when we have drifted from our intentions and gently return, again and again and again. Each return is a practice, a repetition that makes the path more familiar, easier to find. Over time, the path becomes so familiar that we follow it automatically. We do not have to consciously choose simplicity. It has become our default. We do not have to remind ourselves to appreciate. We naturally notice what is good. We do not have to schedule time for friendship. We prioritize it without thinking. This is the goal, to integrate Epicurean wisdom so deeply into our way of being that it becomes natural, effortless, simply who we are, not as a set of rules we follow, but as an understanding that shapes all our choices, a way of seeing that informs all our perceptions. And when we reach this integration, we find that we are living the philosophy rather than just thinking about it. Our lives have become expressions of these principles. Our peace is not something we achieve through effort, but something that arises naturally from the way we live, the choices we make, the values we embody. This is the promise of Epicureanism, that through understanding and practice, we can transform our lives from the inside out. We can become people who are genuinely at peace, genuinely content, genuinely happy, not because our circumstances are perfect, but because we have learned to relate to our circumstances wisely. We have learned to want only what we need. We have learned to appreciate what we have. We have learned to find joy in simple things. We have learned to value what cannot be taken from us. And in learning these things, we have become free from the tyranny of desire, free from the fear of loss, free from the need for constant validation, free to simply be, to exist without agenda, to enjoy our lives as they are, rather than constantly wishing they were different. This freedom is the ultimate goal of Epicurean philosophy. Not freedom in the political sense, not freedom as the ability to do whatever we want, but freedom as the absence of inner compulsion, the peace that comes from no longer being driven by desires and fears we do not understand and cannot satisfy. In this freedom, we finally rest. We finally stop struggling. We finally accept that we are enough, that we have enough, that this moment is enough. And in this acceptance, we find what we have been seeking all along: peace, contentment, the simple pleasure of being alive. Epicurus offers us this gift across the centuries, the gift of understanding, the gift of practice, the gift of community in spirit, even if not in physical proximity, the gift of knowing that peace is possible, that happiness is achievable, that we do not have to continue suffering unnecessarily. All we have to do is listen, to pay attention, to experiment with these ideas and see if they work in our own lives, to practice patiently and persistently the art of living simply, appreciating deeply, relating genuinely. And as we practice, we may find ourselves transformed, not dramatically, not overnight, but gradually, gently, steadily. We may find that we are worrying less, appreciating more, feeling more at peace. We may find that we are making different choices, aligning our actions with what truly serves us. We may find that we are becoming wise, and in this wisdom we find happiness, not as a distant goal finally achieved, but as a constant companion, a quality of experience that permeates our days. Happiness not as peak experiences or intense pleasures, but as the quiet contentment of a life well lived, a mind at peace, a heart grateful for simple blessings. This is what Epicurus promises. This is what he delivers. This is the ancient wisdom that is as fresh and relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Because human nature has not changed. We still seek happiness. We still suffer from unnecessary desires and fears. We still need wisdom to guide us. And Epicurus offers that wisdom freely, generously, asking nothing in return except that we consider it, test it, see if it helps. And if it does help, if we find peace through these practices, then perhaps we might share what we have learned with others, continuing the tradition, passing the gift forward. This is how wisdom survives and spreads, not through institutions or authorities, but through people helping people, one conversation at a time, one example at a time, one life transformed at a time. We become part of this chain, this lineage of seekers who have found something valuable and want to share it. And in sharing, we deepen our own understanding. Teaching clarifies thought. Explaining requires precision. Demonstrating demands embodiment. We cannot share what we do not possess. So the very act of sharing becomes another form of practice, another way of integrating these principles more deeply into our lives. But even if we never share explicitly, even if we never teach or write or speak about these ideas, we share through how we live. Our peace is visible to others. Our contentment is palpable. Our freedom is attractive. People notice, even if they do not comment. They wonder how we manage to be so calm, so satisfied, so unburdened. And sometimes, just sometimes, they ask. And then we have the opportunity to share this gift, this wisdom, this path to peace, not as experts or authorities, but as fellow travelers who have found something valuable and want others to benefit from it too. This is the spirit of Epicureanism, generous, egalitarian, practical, not elite or exclusive, but open to all, not demanding or difficult, but simple and accessible, not distant or theoretical, but immediate and applicable. We can begin right now. We can notice what we have to appreciate. We can let go of one desire we do not actually need. We can reach out to one friend. We can take one breath in full awareness. We can choose one simple pleasure over one complex pursuit. These small choices accumulate. They build momentum. They create a trajectory toward greater peace, greater simplicity, greater wisdom. And before we know it, we have traveled far from where we started. We have become different people, living different lives, experiencing different qualities of happiness. This is the journey Epicurus invites us on, a journey from confusion to clarity, from striving to contentment, from anxiety to peace, a journey that begins with a single step and continues for as long as we live, always offering opportunities to go deeper, to understand more, to embody these principles principles more fully. And the beautiful thing is that we can begin wherever we are. We do not need to change our circumstances first. We do not need to wait for the right time or the right conditions. We can start with one small practice, one small shift in understanding, one small choice aligned with peace. And that one small beginning can transform everything. Because once we taste peace, we want more of it. Once we experience contentment, we prefer it to striving. Once we know freedom, we will not willingly return to bondage. The taste of truth awakens something in us. It calls us forward, beckons us deeper, invites us to continue exploring this path that leads to genuine happiness. And we find that we are not walking alone, that others have walked before us, that wisdom lights the way. Epicurus walks with us, his teaching still fresh, still vital, still capable of transforming lives. The garden still exists, not as a place, but as a possibility, a way of being that we can embody, a quality of peace that we can cultivate. And so we continue, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, always returning to simplicity when we have complicated things, always returning to appreciation when we have slipped into complaint, always returning to peace when we have been disturbed. Each return is easier than the last. Each practice deepens the capacity. Each moment of clarity makes the next one more likely. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, we are transformed. We become who we were always meant to be, peaceful, content, free. We become embodiments of Epicurean wisdom, living proof that these ancient teachings still work, still matter, still offer genuine liberation from unnecessary suffering. This is our birthright, our possibility, our path. All we have to do is walk it.